Big thanks go out to Tywa for supporting today's video via Patreon. Keep getting distracted today and forgetting to hit the record button, so here's a replay for you. Narset Enlightened Exile versus Jared. And we have a 3-lander with some cantrip spells here, so I do decide to keep this one. Got a means of making tokens as well. And we draw into a Lightning Helix on turn 1. So I decide to crack the Misty Rainforest for a blue source, and then it's in for the Brainstorm so that we can decide what our next draws are going to be and then shuffle stuff we don't want away with the Polluted Delta. Getting to another fetch, a Lightning Bolt, and the Balmor, which will buff our token army if we can manage to make one. So I decide to put the Jeskai Ascendancy away. It's not much use to us while we don't have a token army available. And Wooded Foothills goes on the top, ready for us to draw next turn. Our opponent gets the mill on the way on turn 2, Satyr Wayfinder, and reveals to us with that a Twilight Mire, which he puts into hand, not showing me the reveal zone in the replay room for some reason. But it's a land, Silverglade Pathfinder, and Corpse Churn put into the bin. So we draw into the Wooded Foothills, play that straight away so that we can shuffle away the enchantment, and then just decide to play the Balmor here. See the Twilight Mire straight away from our opponent, and then it is an Eccentric Farmer for some more self-mill. So deciding to take a Reflecting Pool land that time, and we see in the bin this time a Deadly Tempest and a Life's Legacy. Play the Battle Forge, and Delayed Blast Fireball is going to be of use to us for a one-sided board wipe at some point, but I'm just hoping to curve out with You See a Pair of Goblins into Narset next turn, and we'll have prowess on those tokens, as well as buffing them up with the Balmor, hopefully. Just means that it's just a case of hoping that we don't get interfered with, because we don't have protection for the Narset. And speaking of interference, there is a Ravenous Chupacabra onto our only creature. Nothing we can do about that, so just go through to the end step and we'll make a couple of Goblin tokens after taking 3 damage from the 2 creatures. And now getting into another land in Arid Mesa, so deciding to play that one out straight away for another blue source. And that takes us into Narset Enlightened Exile. So like I said before, just a case of sitting back and hoping that our opponent can't do anything about that. A Grisly Salvage will reveal the top 5 cards. Again, we can't see what they revealed, but it is a Hermit Druid, Tortured Existence, Mulch, Avatar of Woe, and a Massacre Worm. They do take the Massacre Worm here. So for those who don't know, it's Mulch, Hermit Druid, Tortured Existence, and Avatar of Woe. And the Massacre Worm is not good for us because we're looking to make a bunch of tokens, and that will be -2/-2 on all of our creatures. They have played both the lands that they revealed to us previously. We draw into another land, which is good because I can hold on to the shuffle effect this way. And decide to go for the Ponder first of all. I was thinking about going for the Foretell on this, ready for next turn potentially, doing a one-sided board wipe, but yeah, we should be expecting the Massacre Worm really, because they're only 1 land away from it. Ponder triggers prowess on all of our stuff, and I've just clicked through it accidentally. There was 1 card on top, followed by Roar of Resistance and a Snap. Snap with the ETBs doesn't seem too good, so I decided to put all 3 cards on top regardless, and shuffle here. And we do just draw into a Triome in its place, which isn't great. I was hoping for a non-creature spell there. Anyway, we can swing in with all of our creatures that have a +1/+1 buff thanks to the Ponder. That triggers the Narset, and decide to point that at You See a Pair of Goblins to make more Goblin tokens. Fully expecting to see the Massacre Worm, but I don't want our opponent to hold it over our head and wait until we've got an entire army of tokens in play. If they're going to play it, then I'd rather they do it quickly. So trying to force the issue here. And obviously we can wipe out their creatures with a Delayed Blast Fireball. But they just decide to block everything, so we don't get any damage through there whatsoever. And they're looking to take out our creatures with that worm, I imagine. So I do decide to set up the next turn and foretell this card. So, as we expected, our opponent drops the Phyrexian Worm and wipes out our tokens here. And that does mean that we lose 2 life per creature that goes down, so 8 life lost. A tactic that I thought of after the fact was we could have not foretold the Delayed Blast Fireball, and we could have held up Lightning Helix and the Lightning Bolt. That would have allowed us to take out the Massacre Worm and buff all of our tokens past its ability as well, because they would have been 3/3s, but I didn't think about that until after the fact. And we make an excellent draw in Monastery Mentor, one of the best white token producers you can get. So play out the Monastery Mentor straight away, and decide to swing in with the Narset here, because I want to try and get rid of that Massacre Worm before we start making a bunch of tokens. Obviously decided to play the Mentor in first because we're going to flash something back here, so that is a Brainstorm that I decide on. Does likely mean that we're going to be losing the Narset. I do make a couple of mistakes in this game, I think. Should have played a land so that we could have again held up both of these spells and buffed our commander past the 6 power that this is going to block with, because obviously Brainstorm is going to buff our commander here, so it would have been +3/+3 this turn had I played a land in time. I'm always conscious of playing the tap lands in when I'm not eager for mana, and saving on to shuffle effects for when we need those as well, especially off the back of a Brainstorm. But should have played the land first here. We draw into a Consider, which now has Surveil 1 printed on it, curiously enough. Third Path Iconoclast, and a Shock Land. So put the Shock Land and something else on top. I can't remember what was in my hand now. Massacre Worm blocks the Narset, as you would expect. So I could have gone for Consider and Lightning Bolt onto my opponent there, and it would have buffed this up enough to survive the Massacre Worm. I think that's what I should have done, but I don't think I'd do it here. First time ever playing the deck, and I'm not much of a Jeskai Prowess Spellslinger player, apparently. Although no, I do decide to go for the Lightning Bolt here, so triggering a bunch of Prowess. Okay, yeah, that was it. So I had 6 toughness on the Narset there and decided not to Consider for whatever reason. So do lose the Narset there, which is the wrong play. So now from our opponent, it is a Relentless Pursuit. And they reveal the top 4 cards. They choose to put a Ghoul Tree into their hand, Oversold Cemetery, Lurgoyf, and Caustic Caterpillar going to go into the bin. Obviously the Ghoul Tree is going to be a lot cheaper to get into play, especially after loading up the graveyard on that last spell. So Jared Golgari Lichlord into play after that. No doubt ready for the Ghoul Tree to come into play. And like I said before, we should have our Narset in play here, get down a Triome off the back of the fetch land there. But instead I just decide to stop playing reservedly. I was fully expecting a Living Death or something like that from my opponent, but we don't see it during this game. Hopefully you don't mind spoilers. Third Path Iconoclast I wasn't going to play, but just decide to go all out here because we do need to be making as many tokens as possible. Decide to Consider first because I want to see what card is on top of our library that we draw into, and that might dictate what we do for the rest of the turn. So decide to Surveil a Leonin Light Scribe. If we didn't have our back against the wall here, that would have been a decent play, especially with all the token generation, but we're going slow enough as it is here, so decide to throw that away. Draw into a land for the turn instead. And I actually don't go for the Third Path Iconoclast. This is where we see how the turn could have played out differently here if I had not had to recast the Narset. So we effectively lose a turn here. And we didn't really get any new information out of the Consider anyway. We would have been a card less into our library, which means we would have been looking at actually drawing the Light Scribe, which would have been good next to the Third Path Iconoclast. Anyway, our opponent drops the Ghoul Tree, as we were fully expecting. The Jared is an 11/11, and throwing a Prowess token in the way of that when it goes into the red zone, because obviously if they hit us for 11, there's every chance that they can get us next turn by flinging this, and maybe another creature. Actually, they'd probably be able to do it this turn, because they do have a decent amount of mana. They'd only need a little mana dork or something. Anyway, another huge creature coming into play, a Carrion Grub. That is a 12/5, gets a +X buff, where X is the biggest power in the bin. And we do see a Gigantosaurus, a 10/10. And there we see the Arcane Denial, one of the only counterspells, just a straight up counterspell in the deck. I tried to fit as many modal counterspells in the deck as possible so they're not useless when they're in the bin. You can flash them back and draw cards and bounce stuff and whatever. But it's not typically a bad thing to have a counterspell available to you. So we go for the Iconoclast here, continuing to go slow in our token generation. Cast the Felwar Stone into that, makes a bunch of prowess, makes a couple of tokens to our 2 token generators as well. And don't forget the monk tokens have prowess twice. Now that our commander is in play, prowess does stack. So they have prowess anyway, but get it again from the commander. Meaning they get +2/+2 per non-creature spell that is cast. So I just decide to swing in with everything here. We're trying to encourage our opponent to block with this thing so that we can finish it off with a lightning helix. I'm hoping that they'll block with both creatures and then fling this one, which isn't a play they should really make, but I'm just trying my luck at this point because I know I've made a few mistakes at this point in the game. Also, Narset will allow us another cast. We are sacrificing the Narset in order to get a free Ponder and hopefully get into some spot removal for this stuff. So casting the Ponder makes tokens and triggers prowess a bunch, but not getting into any spells whatsoever on top. The best thing there is a Sekenzen. So decide to dump all this back on top and go for the shuffle effect with Ponder. Draw into a random card. And wouldn't you know it, it is just a land from the Ponder. And our opponent unfortunately just blocks with the Ghoul Tree. Doesn't throw this in harm's way with its only 5 toughness. And we are going to see the back of the Narset once again. So now the only hope is that our opponent flings this at the end of the turn, which he likely will. Then does that next turn, swallows up 3 mana, and does not manage to get rid of us because we will survive with the Lightning Helix if we bolt our opponent with that. Like I said before, had our opponent blocked with this and had it survive, they could have sacrificed the Ghoul Tree at the end of the turn, and then that would have allowed us to Lightning Helix that before they can fling it. But our opponent's too good for that, I think. So instead, flinging the Ghoul Tree, hitting us for 10 and knocking us down to 12. And that does buff this thing, so it does have 1 extra power, it's a 13/5. And then our opponent just goes straight in for flinging the 13 damage at us, so we have to respond here by Lightning Bolt in the face and gaining 3 life to the Lightning Helix, which of course triggers all our creatures again. Knocks them down to 18, knocks us down to 2, but we do manage to survive, of course. Also got the Arcane Denial held up for any more big creatures that they can throw down. But like we said before, we're only at 2 life here, so all they need is a Viridian Zealot to throw at us, and they do have the 3 mana available for that, so that forces us to use the Arcane Denial here, which unfortunately does have them draw a couple of cards with 3 mana held up. But I don't think Golgari's going to do any direct damage to us. Not without flinging a creature in this case, anyway. So we're making a bunch of tokens while all this is going on, while we have our backs against the wall and are hoping to get into something. Been in top deck mode a lot this game, unfortunately. So Arcane Denial goes on the stack, our opponent draws 2, we draw 1, but we'll obviously draw during the draw step as well, so we've got a couple of chances to get into something. Okay, there's a Wear and Tear, which we can point at our own artifacts, so that's useful. And a Burn Down the House to make more tokens as well, so I'm basically working out what we can do at this point, how many spells we can cast, because there's every chance we can go wide. And what I eventually plump for is Delayed Blast Fireball. Does 5 damage to our opponent, does 5 damage to the creatures as well that our opponent controls, but that's not relevant. Just trying to get Prowess triggered and 5 damage on our opponent to help push what we hope is the final points of damage through here. So making sure to tap down the Mana Rock, because that's what we're going to blow up with the Wear and Tear. Could have done this at instant speed, which might have been better practice, but decide to go for a main phase, Delayed Blast Fireball, 5 damage to my opponent, and triggers Prowess a bunch. And then I decide to turn in sideways, noteworthy that the Soldier tokens and the Iconoclast do not have Prowess, thanks to our Narset going down. But the Monastery Mentor, seeing us through to victory here, I'm hoping. Blocking the Monastery Mentor with the Jared, getting rid of that will be a good idea. But at this point in the game, I was hoping that it's too late for my opponent. 3 mana held up, don't forget. Wear goes on to the Felwar Stone, no enchantments to target. And we managed to get our opponent go down to -11, which I was amazed to see here. The Monk tokens got buffed up to 3/3s, and then obviously these were at base power. And it was enough to get our opponent. Can't remember what I was drawing into here, but I don't think there was too much on top of the library. It was just lucky that we had that Monastery Mentor, because this thing really saved us in the end. Right, let's try another game in which I actually remember to hit the record button. Up against Cezanne this time with some fast mana and a cantrip. We will try that because I think we'll be able to get out Narset on turn 2. And our opponent is on the play here, so we are on the draw and get into a Krenko's command. So make sure to play an untapped land in command tower. Takes us into the Soul Ring, of course, and then that can make a Talisman of Progress. And could go for the Preordain off that, but we'll wait until the Narset is in play, maybe. Does it matter if we do that? Yeah, I'll hold on to it, because we could maybe go Narset next turn into Krenko's command and Preordain the turn after. Alright, our opponent just making 2 lands and passing the turn, so might be that there's some removal in our future for the Narset. We'll shock down the Hallowed Fountain and play the Narset, test our opponent for removal. Okay, and then a 3rd mana, not sure what our mono black opponent is doing here. And that is a 3rd path Iconoclast, so I think we're okay to get that down here. Play the Izzet land in untapped, the Iconoclast into play first, then we can go for the Krenko's command here. Our opponent did hold up priority there, so I'm not sure if they do have removal for the Narset. Going to allow us to cast this first though. So prowess on the Iconoclast as well, thanks to our commander being in play, but we really only care about the token generation for now while that has Summoning Sickness. We do fully expect this to be a draw pain deck, so yeah, we should be able to get into some decent stuff once our opponent starts making us draw cards, assuming that that's what he's doing in Saison. I don't know what else you would do. Gonna miss out on a point of damage here with the Narset because I'm not going for Preordain. But we'll still get 5 points of commander damage, assuming that we can swing in with Narset. Our opponent is paused at the beginning of combat, but allowing us to attack, so we will get an attack trigger and make some more goblin tokens. Maybe our opponent's allowing us to do this so that we can wipe the board. Or so that he can wipe the board, I mean. So Krenko's command being cast again thanks to Narset. We'll trigger prowess and token shenanigans. I like being a little bit more reactionary with the Preordain as well, because if our opponent does wipe the board, then it will help us make a decision on what to scry to the top and what to get rid of. Okay, a Dark Ritual from our opponent and straight into the Bolas's Citadel. Ugh, and there's an Underworld Dreams as well, which could be part of a combo, but we'd be pretty unlucky if it was on top of the library. They just go down to 32 life, so they've either got something really big on top, or it's a land and they can't play a 2nd land with the Bolas's Citadel. Alright, there's a Leonin Light Scribe, which we will get the chance to play this turn. So get the Light Scribe into play. And this will be +1/+1 whenever we cast an instant or sorcery, which there's going to be 2 of during this turn, thanks to the Preordain and Narset. Could be our opponent's holding up removal on top of Bolas's Citadel as well. So cast ourselves a Preordain, see what we can draw into, and all this prowess starts to become relevant now. We've effectively got prowess on everything twice thanks to the Light Scribe and our commander. So that's +2/+2 on everything. And there we see a snap, that's just a creature. Delayed Blast Fireball isn't going to do much good either, so let's bottom both of these with the risk of, maybe just getting into a land. We could protect our commander with the snap as well, but I don't think our opponent's going to do anything about it, so we'll just pray that we don't see a land. It is Field of the Dead. So let's swing in. We get another Preordain at least. Haven't actually worked out how much damage we've got on our opponent here, but it's close to lethal. So Narset triggers again. We could go for the Dark Ritual, but do the Preordain instead. Dig down a little bit more into our library. And alright, that's cool. And empty the Warrens and a Jeska's Will as well. So it's empty the Warrens on top, then a Jeska's Will we draw into. Pretty sure we've got our opponent here though, don't have an instant that we could have gone for there. Could have scried them both to the bottom and tried to get an instant, but this looks like lethal to me. Yep, get them down to -11, so really liking Narset Enlightened Exile. There aren't many commanders that I liked from this mini set, but Narset was one of them. I do love some token generation. Hopefully you all enjoyed it as well. I'm tribalkai. Thank you for watching.